Let's just get into this, because if I sit here at the beginning rambling, this video is going to take way too long. So instead of doing my usual intro, gameplay, characters, plot, etc., I'm going to be formatting this in a more, organic way. Since Killzone is a fairly large series with more lore than I thought, it'd be easier to just introduce events and characters as they occur. Firstly, let's go over the actual origins of the series, not like in depth, but just give an idea of what we're getting into. I guess I'll call this the basics. The first Killzone game was released in 2004 by Guerrilla Games for the PS2. In 2005, SIE became the parent company for Guerrilla, so every subsequent title remained a PlayStation exclusive. Killzone Liberation came out in 2006 for the PSP, then we didn't get our mainline sequel Killzone 2 until 2009 on the PS3. Killzone 3 coming out shortly after in 2011. Then the last entry, Shadowfall, came out in 2013, and Mercenary as well on the Vita. At this point, I've played every single game, more than once for some of them, but I will be leaving Shadowfall out of this one because I can already tell it's going to be a whole ordeal. Oh, and I would like to point out, the same company that made this series also made Horizon Zero Dawn, so yeah, a bit of contrast there. I'm having a hard time on what section to talk about next, because the real meat of all of this is the lore rather than the story or characters. Because funnily enough, Killzone has quite a lot of it. I had to do some digging because the story in the games is so incoherent that I didn't even realize I wasn't on Earth in the first game until I actually looked into it. But I suppose I can go over gameplay first, because oh man, I've got a bit to say. So I'm gonna go over which versions I played just to get that out of the way. I essentially played these games in the release order. So I played Killzone on PS2 and then 2 and 3 on the PS3. Yes, I know there was a remake of Killzone in the Trilogy collection, but I felt I needed to play the original. I have already played the remake, but I'll leave that comparison for a follow-up. The main idea of the original Killzone is that you get to control up to 4 different characters, and whichever character you pick, you get to experience levels in a different way. It's not a major shift from one character to another, but it is noticeable enough, and I'm surprised a first-person shooter on the PS2 had the gumption to do something this bold. I won't mention the characters and playstyles here, but I'll say who they actually are when I get to the main story section. For Killzone, there are 4 characters you can shift between: Templar, Rico, Luger, and Haka. I must be 100% honest, I only played through Killzone twice, and the 2 characters I played as were Templar and Haka. I'm not really one for heavy weapons, and the stealth in this game wasn't very clear, so I didn't know how to utilize Luger. This is a faux pas on my part, but finding time to have to potentially play this game 2 or 3 more times wasn't conducive to the whole idea of this video. So let me go over them real quickly. Templar is our all-around soldier type. He's fairly self-explanatory. Rico is more of a heavy weapon build, carrying around a large machine gun. Luger is the designated stealth character. She's got night vision as well as a silenced pistol and a knife. And then we have Haka, who is more in the same vein as Templar, but he can carry more ammo for the Hellgast assault rifle. He's also equipped with a knife, which I think I used like once. My main reason for picking Haka once I got him is because the primary Hellgast rifle, the STA-52, in Killzone at least, is possibly the best overall weapon in the game. You get a lot of ammo for it due to most enemies carrying it around, and it also has a shotgun secondary that has a fairly effective spread on it. The standard ISA rifle, the M82G, is also great for accuracy and damage output, having a grenade launcher instead of a shotgun, but the ammo for it is less frequent, so it's easier just to stick to the STA-52. I like secondary modes for firearms and first-person shooters. It's something I really liked about Syndicate. Oh wait, hold on, KT's gonna do their obligatory I played this on easy segment. Honestly, this is probably the only time I'm going to mention it, because once we get into the story, I don't think it matters, but yes. I play most games on easy, especially older games, because I don't have the right brain capacity for them. But oh my god, Killzone was a menace at times. Due to the limitations on the PS2, there weren't as many enemies you had to deal with, but when you did, it was tiresome. A lot of classic era first-person shooter game enemies always seem to have high accuracy, and I was at one point literally getting shot at by things I couldn't even see because they were outside of the render distance. Oh, and the sniper rifles. Why are these games so greedy with sniper rifles? And why are they afraid of weapon wheels? Return to Castle Wolfenstein had a weapon wheel, or well, I think it did. I know you had like 20 guns and the game never took them from you. I hate when games give me cool guns, then once I get to a new scene, it's just gone. Like, come on, why? I literally walked into another screen with a sniper rifle, STA-18, an STA-52, and somehow all I've got is a standard issue pistol and an M82G? Who stole my guns? What were we talking about? Oh yeah, sniper rifles. There are so many points in this game where you're going through a massive expansive wasteland, and there was no way to effectively take out enemies unless you either got lucky with a headshot or charged headlong into them. I know putting a sniper rifle on every level would have potentially broken the game, but the levels that did need it didn't have it, and many of the levels you could obtain it didn't need it. I don't know, I like being a sniper. Don't take this from me, game. I don't even know if any of that made sense. Let's just move on. So yeah, Killzone, despite all that, is a fairly standard PS2 era first-person shooter. So Killzone 2 and 3 improved upon that, right? Right? KT? I'm gonna have to start my issues with Killzone too early. Please, please, please do not click away. I promise this video is going to be good. I just need to point this out because I can't be the only one who is frustrated with it. So Killzone decided to go backwards in its design philosophy. Okay, I get it. I say this a lot, games are tough, hard to make, but this game had 5 years of development. Let me bring up my handy dandy timeline again. 5 years. So I generally don't mention controls unless it's like something egregious. This is egregious. So the standard Killzone controls layout is a bit odd. It isn't bad, but I was having a hard time with grenade being on L1 and zoom on R3. This just didn't work with me. But the first game does allow you to completely remap controls, so I ended up flipping grenade and zoom. This made my playthrough a lot more enjoyable, though I did keep randomly throwing grenades because my brain kept thinking R3 was sprint instead of L3. I could have switched them, but oh well, I didn't use any grenades otherwise, so it sort of worked out. So here's the egregious part. Killzone 2 and 3 don't let you outright remap controls, which means I had to either use the weird default layout or use the few alternate profiles they had, which sorta helped. But come on, letting us remap everything is so good, why take it out? So as I mentioned in Killzone, most of the guns had a secondary fire, which I liked. Killzone 2 and 3 decided to take all of that out as well. And before you start saying, OKT, the game was more multiplayer focused, every mid-2000s to 2020 FPS was more catered to multiplayer. It was the standard. It honestly still is, but that doesn't get to be an excuse. A primary excuse for first-person shooters having less story and less to do mechanically stems from the fact that yes, when online gaming was becoming more popular and accessible, they wanted the experiences to be less complicated, which I find ironic considering in most online first-person shooter games we currently have, they have so much going on, it's nearly impossible to even understand how to start a game, let alone how the weapons and loadouts work. So yes, a lot of games would take out features. With Killzone, it was weapon complexity, and the ability to remap controls for some reason. I'm going to say this because I don't know where else to put it. I can't play Killzone 2 or 3 online. Those got shut down years ago, and as of August 2022, the online for Shadowfall is even gone. They do have bot modes. This is where you can do multiplayer functionality with AIs. I did eventually do some bot runs at Killzone 3, and oh man, those are hilarious. I actually find them really fun. But yeah, due to that, I unfortunately don't have much to say on the multiplayer aspects of the series. Why do I even play first-person shooters? Why do I torment myself? Why do they gotta be fun sometimes and have questionable characters that I can't stop thinking about? So besides that, the main obvious difference is the overall difference in narrative, which focuses more on environmental storytelling as well as way too many cutscenes to count. I enjoy the atmosphere and tone of 2 and 3, but it's just too much at times. Loud explosions, people yelling, screen shaking, flashing lights, everything that gives me a headache. I prefer the more grounded and limited style of Killzone because it allows me to breathe and experience the levels better than, oh my god, go this way, run, 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 go, 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 bang, 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 kaboom, kaboom, curse boom. I know it's war, but like, I just get a vibe sometimes, you know? Oh yeah, remember how you got to play 4 different characters in Killzone? Not in the sequels, you play as one plain Jane dude. Sev. Okay, I like Sev, he's fine, but I love the idea of being able to choose a certain character for a certain mission. Despite not playing Killzone more than, you know, like 1 or 2 times, the replay value is actually incredible. With the 10+ hour story and the multiple characters, you definitely got your money's worth. But here I am with the sequels buying a $60 game that, even though it says the story is 7 to 8 hours long, I found myself beating in about 6. Yes, again, easy difficulty, but like, come on. This is why people got so frustrated with console shooters back in the day, and why tacked-on story was such a point of contention with a lot of gamers. Can I stop talking about gameplay now? Yes? No? Well, I'm gonna stop talking about gameplay, because honestly, all I'm gonna do is complain, and I know I'll bring up stuff when I get to the individual games. Despite how much I am complaining at the moment, I actually do like a lot of aspects of this series. I think I said before, back in the beginning, this game has a lot of lore. Yes, despite what Killzone lacks in coherent story, it makes up for a massive amount of lore. Heck, they even released a novelization of Killzone 3 called Killzone Ascendancy, which I bought. It is indeed a thing. I will talk about it more when I get to Killzone 3. But lore, tasty, tasty lore, which I'm going to go over quickly and poorly. I apologize in advance. Buckle up, cause we gonna be here for a while. So basically, humans decided to do what humans do and eat up all of Earth's resources. This caused a massive nuclear war to break out, and after that war, people realized they needed to branch out and start colonizing other planets. All the super powerful and wealthy countries ended up forming what was called the United Colonial Nations. Oh wait, there's a timeline, that's super helpful. Why is there so much? What is all of this? The Omen incident? The Helgen Corporation? Capitalism? What is this game? Okay, KT, focus. This video can't be like 5 hours long. Let's just try to cover the basics. So there's like this whole deal with financing and monopolizing space travel and the colonization by the UNC. There are also issues with the UNC losing control and ultimately having to dissolve their military power within the colonies. Thus, the United Colonial Army was formed. Then, due to an incident called the Omen, several ships were lost and the UNC took a massive financial hit. This means other corporations, mainly the Helgen Corporation, which was a massive energy and production powerhouse at the time on Earth, managed to gain contracts to start colonizing mainly the Alpha Centauri system. The journey was fairly difficult, many of the Helgen population dying in cryostasis upon coming to their first planet in Alpha Centauri B, which they aptly named Helgen. This world was primarily filled with snowy and arid wastelands that had pockets of great and terrible jungles full of all manner of deadly creatures and plants. Though the planet was filled with a wealth of energy and resources, it wasn't suitable for sustaining life for long periods. The Helgen left a small collection of individuals with an orbiting station to survey the planet while they moved on to another potentially suitable one in the nearby system of Alpha Centauri A. Despite their supplies dwindling, they managed to come upon an Earth-like planet which was named Vecta, named after Helgen CEO Philip Vecta. With the quick colonization and resource capabilities of Vecta, the planet was able to swiftly supply the other colonies with much-needed resources. So a little science fact, because KT likes space stuff, Alpha Centauri is a binary star galaxy, consisting of Regio Centaurus, Vecta Star, and Ptolemon Helgen Star. Neither star as of right now has been surveyed to have actual planets, but their tertiary friend, Proxima Centauri, does, and one within the habitable zone. I don't know, I thought this was neat. Let's carry on. Since the colonies were rapidly growing and a sizable distance from Earth, the UNC found it difficult to manage and maintain them efficiently. Thus, the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance was formed. The ISA is the main form of military power within the colonies and Vecta. Though the ISA is not controlled by one single branch office, each coalition is its own entity. Once Vecta is essentially secured and established, the Helgen go about giving the same wealth to Helgen and the adjoining colonies. Everyone is able to work, supplies are flowing, and any ships now entering the systems are able to resupply and re-establish themselves. The Helgen even goes so far as to creating their own small arms militia, though this is looked down upon by the ISA. Eventually, even with Helgen now a planet of prosperity, the Helgen Corporation, now the Helgen Protectorate, decides to rein in a new civil administration and go by the Helgen Administration. Due to their vast wealth and their unwillingness to want to keep bowing to Earth, they decide to put in an offer to the UNC to buy the whole of the Alpha Centauri systems. This would mean it would be taken out of ISA control as well. The offer was taken by the UNC due to them being low on funds and needing finances for other colonization efforts. So yeah, yeah, this mega corporation just said like, hey, we've got cash, why don't we just buy everything? And they did. Now with the ownership of both Vecta and Helgen, the Helgen are essentially able to control the supply chain for the whole of the colony, this allowing them to do whatever they wish financially to non-Helgen ships. With the tariffs created by the Helgen administration on colonizing ships, the UNC began to push back, displeased by the amount of wealth the Helgen were making off the backs of their endeavors. Despite Earth and the UNC trying to come to an agreement, the Helgen administration seceded and became their own independent colony. This is what caused the first extrasolar war. With this, the UNC wanted to retaliate with embargoes, but it was considered detrimental to Earth as a whole due to the needing the resources of the colonies just to survive. The UNC instead ordered the UCA Navy to seize control of all primary points of trade so as to try to reclaim some control from the Helgen. This caused skirmishes between the Helgen militia and the ISA to form. Above Helgen, the UCA Navy tried to overtake the large orbiting station, the Helgen ships being able to do little and the station being mysteriously destroyed. The UCA claimed it was the work of Helgen's sabotage, but the Helgen refuted it was due to UCA attack. The Helgen could do little to fight off the UCN and ISA, the forces quickly taking control of Vecta. Due to this, much of the Helgen administration was dissolved, and the Helgen had no choice but to bow to UCA control. With the defeat, many Helgens chose to try to live peacefully, but a resistance was brewing. This caused a lot of turbulence on Vecta, thus causing the planet to no longer be the paradise it once was. The ISA clamping down on Helgen populations, those who still had wealth and power pulled their resources and purchased ships that would allow them to leave the planet and try to survive on the inhospitable planet of Helgen. The UCN and UCA, not wanting anything to do with this, refused to help, and the UCN also decided to designate the Helgen administration as its own sovereign nation so as to keep them outside the benefits of the UCN. This also put Helgen under tariffs and blockades until diplomatic relations could be normalized. The ships landing on Helgen, the population had little to do but suffer the wrath of the harsh climate. Life on Helgen was hard, many of the pockets of population realizing this and bringing their resources together to support one another. Due to not having the same medical prowess of the ISA and Vecta, several would often die from disease due to the turbulent environment of the planet. Though the Helgen were able to prosper in an unlikely way, the mineral and energy-rich planet they had to call home, they were able to gain ground and work their way into becoming a proper nation. Helgen was able to regain some form of power through their energy and mineral refinement. The tariffs placed on them by the ISA would still hurt the struggling colony. This caused even more animosity from them to grow. Despite all odds and through self-sufficient work and infrastructure, they were able to continue to gain power and even decline an offer from the Independent Colonial Strategic Alliance, the ICSA being an offshoot of the ISA that had separated itself from Earth. This denial was mainly due to growing Helgen paranoia from outside forces. By this point, Helgen was slowly going under control by a stronger generation of Helgen, able to survive the harsher conditions of the planet's inhospitable nature. Being labeled the third generation, several Helgens of note were born, one being the future autarch of Helgen, Scholar Visari. But, due to the lack of technological advances for the Helgen, many of their old world machinery began to break down, and because of the tariffs from Vecta, they were unable to maintain economic stability. This causing the colony to fall into a depression, those of Vecta unwilling to help. Due to the social and economical unrest, Visari eventually laid claim to the leadership of Helgen under the title of Autarch and ushered in many of the staples of the Helghast society, even going so far as to ban the English alphabet and create their own, and even attempt to make a new language. With the newly minted Helghast forming and under Visari, they were able to regain some control in terms of trade via black market routes to undermine the ISA. The ISA unable to do much to stop them. Helgen eventually entered into an agreement with the ICSA and were able to pull themselves out of their economical depression. During this time, the Helghast were even able to rebuild an orbital station, though not to the monolithic one they once had. Due to the newfound pride for themselves and a taste for conquest, Visari set his eyes on Vecta, wanting to rejoin the great colonies of Helgen. Hey look, it looks like we finally got to one of the games. Oh, bless you Killzone Wiki for having all of this, because I sure as heck didn't know any of it from playing the games. So this is where Killzone actually starts, which means I'm going to be changing the formatting to directly recount what is covered in the game. I may refer back to the lore tidbits just to sort of explain things, but we'll see. I want to be informative, but we can't go over everything. So Killzone opens with a cinematic featuring the Helghast leader, Scholar Visari, giving an empowering speech to his troops. Fun fact, I've never watched this opening cinematic until now.
My people, sons and daughters of Helghan.
I just realized if I had watched the opening cinematic, the story for Killzone would have made a lot more sense. The speech recounts the plight of the Helghast people and how, despite it, they came out stronger. A fleet of Helghast cruisers begin to make their way to Vecta. The orbital station, led by Lieutenant General Stuart Adams, is disabled and the Helghast are able to land, thus laying siege to Vecta City, the main capital of the planet. The ISA forces on the ground are doing their best to hold out. This is where we're introduced to Captain Jan's Templar. Jan? I don't remember how to say it. Templar is a fairly run-of-the-mill character, though I do actually find him to be enjoyable. He was born on Vecta, and after both of his parents died due to pity, a family friend, Bradley Vaughton, took the young soldier under his wing. Templar rose quickly through the ranks of the ISA and became a fairly formidable and loyal soldier. He's our main protagonist in the first Killzone game. Templar in Killzone is voiced by Carl Weber. So I'm obviously playing this game because it has Brian Cox in it, my favorite actor, but I won't be covering the voice actors or actors in detail like I mainly do because a lot of these folks either don't have credits in other things or just don't have extensive histories or, well, only played the character for one game. But I will mention them because I feel like it's the right thing to do. Templar and his men are fighting it out in the trenches against Helghast soldiers. They finally make their way out and into the city where Templar is summoned by General Bradley Vaughton. Getting to the ISA headquarters, Templar asks Vaughton what is going on, and the general begins to explain the situation that he needs to get to the orbital SD station to help bring it back online, but he doesn't have the necessary security key to do so. Templar also asks about Earth helping them, but again, nothing. As the siege on the base heightens, Vaughton asks Templar to find Colonel Gregor Haka, an agent that had infiltrated the Helghast army, specifically the command of Joseph Lente, the primary commander of the assault on Vecta. He says Haka has gained information vital to them, but when he rejoined an ISA platoon, they got overrun in a shopping center in the slums, and no one has heard from them since. The shelling on the ISA headquarters manages to knock out Templar for a moment, and he awakens to several officers scrambling about, Vaughton helping him up. Templar asks if the security key made it, Vaughton saying no. Templar tells the general he'll go after it. Going through an onslaught of enemy soldiers throughout the ISA HQ, Templar is finally about to retrieve the key, then attempt to meet back up with Vaughton. As this is going on, an enemy soldier tries to take him out, only to be killed by an agent in black clothes and stealth gear. She reveals herself to be Shadow Marshal Luger, an individual Templar seems to have a history with. She tells him that Vaughton asked her to meet up with Templar and aid him on his mission. Templar disgruntled by this news. He briefs her on what he's doing, that mainly being the retrieval of Colonel Haka and the security key. Luger is the second character we're able to play in this series. She is a member of an ISA Special Forces operation that mainly focus on stealth-based units. She lost both her parents in the First Vecta War, then later on joined the ISA, then met Templar. The two formed a budding romance, but problems soon arose as Templar wanted her to quit the forces so he wouldn't potentially lose her, Luger refusing to sit at home and not letting him essentially just play soldier. They broke off their relationship and she eventually became a Shadow Marshal. Luger in Killzone is voiced by Taylor Lawrence. Meanwhile, on the orbiting SD platform, Lieutenant General Stuart Adams chides a technician for his tardiness in reporting on what's been going on. The ISA technician tells them that they can't do anything without General Vaughton's security key. Adams interrupts him and remarks he doesn't need to be told the technical specs of the situation due to the whole operation being under his command. He insists that Vaughton will most likely not appear, and that a technician of his caliber should be able to get the SD platform back up and running, key or not. The technician says he is unable to, Adams wondering if he believes in God or some other powerful technical device, and that he should start praying that Vaughton reappears. Luger and Templar now make their way back to the surface and through a station to get to the slums. Getting to a luscious park, they take out a few anti-air weaponry and are met with a large platoon of Helghast as well as a tank. Before trying to advance, an ISA soldier appears and begins to rain down heavy fire on the oncoming troops. Sergeant Rico Velasquez teams up with Luger and Templar, telling them that the Helghast had captured General Vaughton, the general being held on the other side of the park in a gatehouse. Rico is a foul-mouthed heavy weapons unit of the ISA. He is the oldest of 9 siblings and would often get into fights due to his hot-headed nature. His family owned a restaurant where Rico would help eventually, and once the business became profitable, he left. Finding himself aimless and dipping into petty crimes, he joined the ISA and quickly became a formidable soldier. Rico in Killzone is voiced by Tom Clark Hill. Wait, why does Rico have a decently wholesome backstory? It's actually kind of cute. Getting over to the gatehouse, they take out the units and rescue General Vaughton. Vaughton asks for the key, Templar handing it over. He tells the general that the HQ has unfortunately been lost. Vaughton, wanting to know what is currently going on, asks Templar. The captain merely states that it was messy, and if it hadn't been for Rico, they most likely wouldn't have been able to save the general. Rico introduces himself, Vaughton remarking on his usefulness. Rico merely states that Templar and Luger owe him nothing, that it's the Helghast who do, his whole platoon having been wiped out while trying to defend the park. Vaughton asks Rico if he wants to join Templar and Luger on their mission. Rico is hesitant, but he agrees so long as he gets to take out Helghast along the way. Vaughton states he will now go to the SD platform so as to aid Adams while they must continue to find Colonel Haka. Rico now a part of the crew, they continue into the Helghast-infested slums and to a derelict shopping center. Upon entering, they see several executed ISA soldiers, this frustrating Rico. One still being alive, Templar goes to give him first aid, the soldier stopping him. He figures they are there for Haka, Luger asking where he is. The soldier says that he was captured not too long ago and that there will be a potential enemy onslaught between them and their target. Cutting through the abandoned shopping mall and back into the slums, the group finally manage to get to a safe house where they find the captive. They figuring that it's Haka. Rico's upset because the person they were sent to find is Helghast. Rico points his pistol at him, Templar telling him to stand down. The sergeant does so and then Templar and Luger address Haka. Luger correctly identifies him and the captain wonders if he's Helghast, Haka correcting him by saying that he's also half human. Templar asks if he knows who they are, Haka assuming they're there to get him. Luger asks his name just to be sure, Haka plainly stating that he is indeed Colonel Haka. She asks what side he's on, the colonel saying his own. Rico, unwilling to work with the colonel, turns his gun on him, Haka quickly taking it and firing, killing the Helghast at the door. Haka picks up a Helghast assault rifle and is ready to continue with the group, Templar telling Luger to keep an eye on him. Haka is a half-Vectan, half-Helgan soldier and was once a trusted friend of General Lente. He's an expert in weaponry and espionage, and due to his Helgan heritage and upbringing, he is also considered to be highly intelligent and a master strategist. But because of the oppressive rule of Visari, Haka eventually defected and joined the ISA. So I know I said I wasn't going to cover most of the voice actors in detail, but Haka, funnily enough, is voiced by an actor I really like, Sean Pertwee. Sean Pertwee, though a brilliant actor in his own right, is most widely known as the son of the third Doctor, John Pertwee. A lot of younger individuals will probably know him as Alfred from the Gotham series. Cutting back to the SD platform station for a moment, Adams is told of Vaughton's arrival, Adams telling them to prepare. With Haka now in the group, their next course of action is to get him off the planet. They must reach a base where they can get him to a shuttle. Luger says they'll most likely need a boat, Rico frustrated at this and going about insulting Haka in the process. Haka remarks Rico's inability to cope with being on water, Rico clapping back at him. Templar roars at them to play nicely. Making their way outside the city and along a beach, they help out an ISA platoon fight off several incoming Helghast regiments. Getting into the docking area, Haka informs Templar that the information he got from the Helghast needs to be processed before they continue forward with the mission. Templar refuses, but Haka insists. Rico begins to bark at Haka again, but Luger is more compliant with the colonel's demands. The sergeant launches into her, telling her that letting him access their data mainframe is reckless and that he could still be loyal to the Helghast. Haka claps back by iterating how many Helghasts he's killed. Rico again barks, Haka grabbing Rico, Rico pulling out his pistol, Luger pulling out a knife to Rico. They all eye each other down in their standoff, Templar roaring over the three. They all eventually back off and Templar asks Haka what he needs. He says that he found out that one of the terminals on the SD platform was under Helghast control. In order to find out which one and tell Adams, he needs to gain access to the data mainframe. Templar, though hesitant, allows him to do so. While this is going on, Vaughton has managed to make his way to the SD platform, where he is confronted by Adams. The two reactivate the platform, but before things can be conducted further, Haka, down below, finds out that the compromised computer belongs to General Adams. Adams encircles Vaughton with Helghast, Vaughton simply calling him a traitor before he is taken out by a Helghast soldier. The Helgan General Lente appears, noting that he will ensure Visari hears of what Adams did. Adams insists that he will tell him on his own after activating the platform. Templar is concerned for Vaughton, but Haka and Luger are more so worried about the implication. Haka mentioning Adams can now fire the platform's primary weapon on anything. As if to summon it, a large blast is launched into the ocean, the group only able to look on in horror. The unit makes their way across the dock and is finally able to get to a transport. Rico notes the explosion as they get to the boat, this possibly means Adams just destroyed the shuttle base or the fortress. Templar changes direction and says they need to take Haka to a data uplink, so they can directly connect to the SD platform. Rico protests, noting how many Helghast they'll have to fight through. Haka says they have to try because the Earth fleet will be there soon. Rico asks him how he knows this, the Colonel reiterating that he is the spy. Luger mutters if that's the case, Adams can just destroy the fleet before they even have a chance to help Vecta. Templar orders they move forward with his plan. As they race across the water, they're fired upon by Helghast units. The two crash, trying to outmaneuver them, but their effort is wasted and they crash. Templar and Luger wake up next to each other, the two making a few colorful comments before she pushes him aside. Haka helps up Rico, the sergeant pulling away from him. As Rico goes over to the ship to retrieve his heavy weapon, Helghast appear, firing upon them. The unit is now in a densely packed bayou, having to comb through several strong enemy forces. They manage to happen upon a Helghast base, Haka noting its specific kind meant to launch massive offensive measures. Luger suggests they go around it, Rico wanting to fight. Templar notes his plan, wanting to get to the platform. Haka advises that perhaps attacking the base would benefit them. If they create issues early on, it would confuse the enemy, making it easier for them to deal with. Rico scoffs at Haka agreeing with him, the Colonel merely saying that even a monkey can write Shakespeare given enough time. Rico grunts, not knowing what a Shakespeare is. The team take out several large mobile arms as well as a few drought ships and a fairly substantial platoon of Helghast, thus making the base inoperable. They now carry on deeper into the bayou and into a more mountainous area where they come across a fairly substantial ambush of enemy soldiers. Finally making their way to an ISA base, they meet up with a group of allies and are led inside. The Helghast have already breached the base, a dropship landing in its central square. They destroy it and fight their way over to the main tower. Finally able to access the communication channels, Haka goes about trying to contact the SD platform. Before they can do much, an ISA soldier comes in pointing his rifle at the unit. Templar tells him to calm down, the soldier tells them that essentially Adams lied and said Vaughton was the traitor and tried to take over the platform, Adams stopping him. Templar points out that Adams is the one firing upon the surface, the soldier doesn't listen and once again holds the room hostage. Luger manages to knock him in the back, sending him to the ground. Templar asks what happened to Vaughton, the soldier coldly explaining that Adams had killed him. Luger tells the soldier to leave. Templar lets out his rage at the news of the general's death, Luger plainly stating that his death doesn't hinder them as much. Templar says he was her friend as well, she just replying that they still have work to do. Back at the platform, Adams wonders if his actions have now made him more favorable with Visari. Lente replies that his only concern is that he's able to complete his assault and claim victory. Adams knows that due to the ISA not knowing his current allegiance, that shouldn't be a problem. As they speak, an ISA tech emerges, mentioning a detected hack that accessed Adams' personal computer. He's certain it was the doing of Haka. Adams was assured that the Colonel had been captured, but the tech tells him that he was freed by a three-man team under direct orders from General Vaughton. He also attributes the issues at the primary dock area as well as the Helghast base from the same unit. Lente remarks that it would have been impossible for a squad of 4 to do so, Adams muttering that it must have been the work of Templar. Lente wonders who he is, Adam merely stating he's nothing but a troublesome lapdog that was extremely loyal to Vaughton. He figures their plan of going to the uplink, this meaning they'll pass by another area, a GPS beacon. Adams relays orders to tell the beacon to prepare for his arrival. Lente scoffs, saying a team of 4 won't possibly make it that far, Adams reiterating his order. Outside of the base, Haka comes across a dead communications Helghast officer. He takes the con and looks over for a moment, wondering if the unit is watching him. Luger taps Rico on the shoulder, startling him. She notes the next closest location is a GPS beacon, Templar telling Rico that they're used by the SD platform to map out terrain. Before they carry on, Haka stops them, noting a communication over the comm. They ask him what's happening, Haka silencing them until he gets the full message. He turns to them, stating that Adams is going to the beacon, Templar using his newfound hatred for the general to redirect the unit to take him out. Luger tries to protest, Rico happily agreeing. they find their way in an arid, mountainous savanna filled to the brim with Hellgast units. The path forward is difficult, but the unit are able to push forward through the beacon and clear out the Hellgast that had commandeered it. Getting to the main bunker, Templar realized what had occurred was all a setup. The obvious onslaught of enemy forces, meaning Adams, was trying to take them out. Rico is at his end, laying into Haka, assuming he was actually a triple agent? I don't know. If you hadn't noticed, Rico isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Luger gets between the two of them. Haka notes that it was now obvious that the unit was supposed to hear the message stating his only crime was believing it. Rico again says he doesn't trust Haka, offering to ditch him since he can't kill him. Luger says that making the rest of the journey with only 3 could be impossible and that she trusts Haka. Templar, though hesitant, agrees, saying that he still needs him and if he's captured, the Hellgast will rip him apart, this being a good reason as to why Haka would remain on their side. Outside, a small bit of animosity arises from Templar, he wondering if Luger likes Haka. She merely states they need him, Templar muttering about her apathetic behavior. On the base, Adam finds out that the ambush was taken out by Templar's unit. Lente humorously asks what is wrong, Adam saying he'll get them. Lente scoffs, noting that this is something a Helgen should have done in the first place and that he'll go after Templar's unit. He also notes to Adams that Visari will hear of his failure, Adams merely muttering. The team down below comes across an enemy transport, Templar signaling to Rico, Rico signaling back. I honestly like to think what Templar said made perfect sense to Luger and Haka, but then Rico just goes at it and it's just complete gibberish. So Haka ends up putting on the guidance helmet for what the heck is this? I know it's like a game mechanic that's just a cool way of taking out big units like tanks and like, but what even is it in this universe? Hold on, let me see if I can find out. So it's called a DBL-23 Dovat Laser Designator? Whatever the heck that means. Essentially, you can lock onto larger targets and take them out. Where do the shells even come from? I have no idea. Okay, so I actually did find out what it was when I replayed the first game. It's a piece of Helgen tech they take after the unit that was using it on them. It's the reason there are mortars being dropped on you as you run through these trenches. They call this guy a bounty hunter for some reason. I have no idea. Let's just move on. Using the designator to take out a large body of heavy vehicle units and towers, the group managed to get down the mountain and into a fairly dense bamboo forest, the heavy terrain making it difficult to know where the enemies might be hiding. Cutting through the dense brush and into a clearing, they notice a bridge, it being used to supply the Hellgast units. The team decide to blow it up so as to hurt the enemy and move further down the path, finding themselves at a large Hellgast base. Taking out the base, same as the supply bridge and the fire base previously, would deal a great blow to the enemy combatants. The team does so, blowing up several arms and supply stations and even taking out the central command of the base. Getting to a bunker, they come across what appears to be, a map? And Templar points out where they need to go is still too far and they won't make it. Luger asks Haka if he knows when the Earth fleet is arriving, Haka saying he doesn't. Rico makes a colorful remark, Haka snapping back. Luger points out a missile base where they could possibly gain access to Helgen transport. Haka says it won't work due to the fortifications of the base, but Templar notes it's their only option. Lente, making good on his word, takes the transport down to the surface and takes hold of the missile base. I guess he assumed they were going to be there, or it was essentially directly in their path. Back at the SD platform, Adams is seething over what had transpired on the surface and with himself and Lente. The ISA tech enters the room, Adams beginning to list off an idyllic outcome. That Lente was unnecessary and the Templar's unit was killed and that the series of events would have made Visari pleased with him. The tech does the opposite, noting the destruction of the supply bridge, as well as what happened to the Hellgast logistics base and another unit of soldiers. Adams, in a fury, grabs the tech and slams him against the desk, raging over what has just been heard. The motionless body of the officer slides off the surface. Adams flustered over what he had just done. The team now make their way into a large missile base that has been reinforced by General Lente's men, going about doing all they can to sabotage it. Getting closer to the top where a transport is landed, they take out several officers, then eventually get to the platform where Lente is waiting for them. After a firefight ensues, Lente is struck down, lying wounded as the team walk over to the transport. Lente calls out to Haka, Rico asking if Haka knows him. Haka kneels down, taking Lente's identification and stating who he is. The general of the 3rd Army, the primary regiment of the assault on Vecta. Lente scoffs at Haka's lackluster recollection of him. He makes a note of who Haka once was, a trusted ally, someone he even trusted with his own life. Rico is shocked at that fact, Haka adding that what Lente says is true. Haka stands as Lente once more goes on about the feats they had once achieved, but how Haka has now gone soft. The colonel throws it back at him, saying it is Lente who has changed, that he only cared about power. The general chuckles, stating that he will be seen as a hero and that Haka's family sees him as dead, the only one who still sang his praises being his brother before Lente killed him. Haka, without much thought, shoots Lente. He then turns to the group and reiterates their mission, the rest not having anything to say about what had just happened. Adams, having a live feed of the whole ordeal, chuckles at the death of Lente. He now once more, again in a position to prove his worth to Visari. He orders his men to tighten security, since this now means Templar and the others will be coming directly for him. Getting closer to the mountain, they end up having to land due to the bad weather. Rico is frustrated by this, but Templar notes it's the best they could do, and it's better positioned since Adams knows they're after him. Templar walks out into the snow, Luger throwing a bag of supplies to him. She walks up and tries to speak about what would possibly happen after their mission, but Templar interrupts her, saying this ordeal won't be over for a while. Rico wonders what's going on with the two of them, Haka merely playing out their unfortunate past. How they were once in love, but Luger, due to her training, is now a more collected and rational individual, a soldier and not a lover. He then remarks how these traits make her in a way near perfect, though he notes to Templar she is now quite the opposite. Rico just nutters that Haka is full of it. The climb to the mountaintop is a difficult one, a large platoon of heavily armed Helghast between them and their goal. Now, I don't really want to go over the gameplay and stuff in this section, but this part. If there was one part of this game I absolutely love and hated at the same time, it would be the mountain climb. Again, I say this all the time, I'm terrible at games, but this climb is some of the most anxiety-inducing gaming I've done in a while. The levels are extremely open, and there are so many points where the enemy can take you out from a mile away, and you got no active way of getting to them unless you manage to either get a lucky shot off or get close enough. This is especially present in the main pass in the small Helghast base. Once you actually get into the large compound, it becomes easier, but you're still constantly wasting ammo on all the large units, and the sniper rifle becomes almost useless because you're never given ammo for it. It's not until you get to like the actual main base that it becomes more doable, because the enemy units at the top are easy to flank. I would like to note real quickly, when replaying this game on the PS3 version, this section was infinitely better because I did not have a lot of issues with the draw distance like I did with the PS2 one. But it did still get any issues from time to time. Oh, and there's a scene of Adams looking all contemplative for a minute. I don't know, back to my main format until I need to complain again, which will be soon. The team finally get through the main base and are able to commandeer a shuttle. The gang all pile in, Luger taking off immediately. Haka and Rico are thrown to the ground, muttering to one another as they clamber to their seats. They get out into orbit and finally reach the SD platform. Templar points out a craft connected to the hull of the platform, Haka stating it's called a parasite craft, an aggressive dropship of sorts that is meant for the quick deployment of Helghast units. Cutting through the first part of the SD platform, the group gets to a transport within the neck of the station and ride it across to the other section. The ride gives them a full view of the SD platform as well as Vecta. The expected Earth fleet shows up, but it's not a welcomed arrival. The SD platform makes quick work of a few of the large cruisers. Getting into the other half of the station, they now make the final trek to Adams. So the SD platform itself is a hard level, but I get it. It's supposed to be. It's the final level. The enemies are going to be tough. I died a lot, I got frustrated, but this isn't the part I'm going to complain about. It's what happens once you get to Adams. I also have to point out that the confrontation with Adams changes depending on which character you pick. Also, each character has different sections they go through to get to Adams, but I mainly played as Haka once I got to him, so my primary footage is from his perspective. Templar tasks Haka with taking out the parasite ships, since they contain explosives that could easily wipe out the SD platform. Once he gets past the enemies, he manages to finally gain access to the main chamber that houses Adams. Haka will make his presence known by killing an enemy next to Adams. The general will lament over the fact that what has happened ultimately won't matter in the grand scheme of things. There will be no pity for himself, and there will be no end to the Helghast. The Visari sees them as the aggressors and that they are merely claiming what was once theirs, Vecta. Haka refuses to be compared to Adams, stating this outcome was his choice, and that though they are both labeled as traitors, that's where their commonality ends. Adams laughs, saying that killing him won't solve anything, that Lente's death and the defeat of the Third Army won't either. Visari will always continue his attack. And this is the part I was talking about. So the final battle with path. As far as I'm aware, Templar, Haka, and Rico is a massive gauntlet of enemies, and it is torturous. You're essentially one person dealing with an onslaught of elite units until the others finally show up, and even then, you're so desperate for an ammo and so easily overrun that one hit and you're back at it all over again. This really isn't a good way to do the final section of a game, but I can't be too harsh because at the end of the day, Killzone is almost 20 years old, and like no one is really going to be able to watch this video then actively go play it. I will say that this section of the game did become immensely easier when playing the PS3 version, but I really don't want to be making any more comparisons to the two because I'm going to be doing that in a completely other video. So let's just get back to the main narrative. Once the gang regroup, they finally take out Adams and make their escape to the SD platform. Getting onto the shuttle, Luger tells them that they are unable to escape due to issues with the fuel line. Rico offers to help, but Haka steps in. Going over to the fuel line, Haka begins to look over it, but they're quickly attacked by Hellgast. Haka gets pinned down, but Rico gets him to his feet, taking him over to the shuttle. In an effort to protect the others, he is clipped in the shoulder and then sent down, Templar pulling him onto the ship just in time for them to make an escape. Haka, surprised by Rico's heroism, thanks him. The shuttle launches right as the Earth fleet destroys the SD platform. Looking over the scene, Templar says he needs to tell them of Adams, Luger merely wondering if the Hellgast will show up. Templar remarks they will and that they'll be ready for it. Oh man, Killzone is a game. Like I said, this game will be 20 years old come 2024, so it's hard to fault it or even be super critical. As I stated previously, it's not like people are gonna watch this video and decide to go out and play the game. You literally can't unless you've got original hardware. But I actually did enjoy Killzone for what it is, or, well, was. It's a mildly entertaining game, and I know young me would have actually enjoyed it despite how frustrating it would have been. Heck, I beat Return to Castle Wolfenstein. I would have gotten through this eventually. So I suppose now we just move on to the next game, which, isn't Killzone 2. Yeah, so remember how I said this video was gonna end up needing to be about the trilogy? Well, I, lied. Hey, wait, no, please don't click away! Look, after I got done with Killzone 3, I couldn't make heads or tails of the story. I've said this many times at this point. So while doing some digging, I realized that Liberation and Mercenary aren't just spin-offs. Liberation follows directly after Killzone and is mainly about Templar as well as other Killzone characters. And honestly, because of this, I feel like I need to discuss it, especially considering how vastly different Killzone 2 is from Killzone 1. So let's just dive into this surprising little gem of a game. Being released on the PSP in 2006, Liberation follows Templar some time after the end of Killzone in the southern parts of Vecta. The remaining Vecta army, along with help from the Earth fleet, have managed to scatter and take out much of the Helgen threat, the only remaining opposition being that of General Armin Metrak and his associate Tendon Kobar. I won't be going super in-depth with the characters in this game, but I can at least go over Metrak. Also, because this guy, Metrak, does not sound how you assume he does. His voice is hilarious. He's got such a classic villain voice for a dude who looks like he's from 40K.
I look forward to meeting him in person. If he can be turned to our cause, it will hasten the end of this war.
Okay, so Metrak was basically the second in command when it came to the Third Army, he being behind Lente. He's supposedly like, I guess, a Caucasian Helgen? He was born with human features, so peach-colored skin and blonde hair, I guess, even though in the game he's given a normal Helgen complexion and white hair. But his human appearance is his main reason for joining the military and being evil and such. He basically wanted to prove that he was Helgen. Due to Lente being dead and Adams' failures, Visari gives Metrak and Kobar the order of launching one final attack against the Vectans, Metrak targeting a base called Rayhoven. Templar and his men push forward, hoping to stop Metrak before he can get to the Rayhoven base. Along the way, he meets back up with Rico and they continue onward. Rico ends up getting hit, Templar getting him out so he can get medical attention. Luger, the one who is mainly giving Templar all of his objectives, tells him he needs to fall back to the Rayhoven base and evacuate some VIPs. this being Dr. Evelyn Batten, some guy named Hef Milcher, and ISA General Dwight Stratton. After rescuing them, Stratton tells Templar that the nuclear platform area hasn't been secured and that he needs to destroy it so the weapons won't fall into Helghast hands. Templar does so, but they still have to fall back, Metric gaining control of the base. As Templar and his men regroup, the ISA inform him that they've lost contact with the craft carrying the VIPs and that Templar needs to go track it down. Rico drops Templar off outside of a refinery area, Luger telling him that he needs to destroy the refinery, saying it will cut off much needed supplies for the Helghast. Templar is able to do so, then meets back up with Rico at a docking area. Here, Metrak and Kobar appear, speaking of their plans. This game is so cute. Look at these cutscenes. I really do love them. Rico decides to head after Metrak. Templar are tasked with defending the Helghast boat so the ISA can gather intel from it. After this is done, Templar goes after a hovercraft and makes his way into some swamps. Metrak has offered a truce to the Vectans to leave the southern lands, but ISA intel says he's deliberately targeted the craft carrying the VIPs and that Kobar is now looking for them. Templar takes this as his cue to hasten his recovery. The swamp is covered in Helghast, it appearing that Metrak knew he was coming. Templar is overrun, but Rico comes in and helps him out, the two carrying on once more towards the crash site. They finally get to it, the pilot's still alive. He ends up telling them what had happened to the VIPs. While Rico goes out to find medical supplies, the pilot is killed by a sniper, and Templar must fight through the enemy in order to protect what is left of the dropship. Templar ends up losing communications with Rico and Luger as he makes his way along the mountain. Finally getting to an outpost, he comes across Kobar, one of the hostages, at his feet, it being Hef Milcher. Kobar warns Templar if he carries on, he will kill more than leaves in a giant armored suit. Templar disregards Kobar as well as Luger and heads to the outpost. Here, he confronts Kobar and takes out his armored unit. Kobar will talk for a moment, then will be shot in the back by Stratton, the general having been in the unit with Kobar. With Stratton saved, there is one last VIP, Dr. Evelyn Batten. After hearing about the death of Kobar, Metrak refuses any kind of negotiations and tells the ISA he claimed a nuclear weapon from Rayhoven. Stratton, not wanting Metrak to use it and finding out where it is, orders an airstrike on Metrak's base. Luger tries to stop it, saying that Metrak can't use the weapon because Evelyn hasn't given him the codes to arm it. At this time, Templar learns Rico has been captured by Metrak. Since they still want to save Evelyn as well, Templar and Luger infiltrate the base. Getting through a fairly sizable unit of Helghast, Templar tells Luger to go back, not wanting her to get in any trouble. Luger refuses and makes her own way through the base. She ends up disabling the security, allowing Templar an easier time getting deeper into the base. It turns out Metrak has been torturing Evelyn, trying to get the codes from her. Templar, after fighting whatever the heck this little cutie patootie is, look at him! He's such a big old fella! Why weren't these guys in Killzone 2? Look at him! Look at this big precious lad! Templar rescues Evelyn and continues trying to find out where Rico is. Needing to get Evelyn to safety, Templar has her stay in a Helghast jet fighter while he goes and deals with Metrak. Basically, I don't have much to really add about this fight, but it is actually really fun. Metrak will do his evil villain speech before launching into Templar with his chain gun grenade launcher combo. This fight has 3 phases, 2 of which are him in a random arena shooting at you, and the last is him in an artillery gun, you needing to disable the power in order to get him out. It took me a bit to actually get him because if you die, you had to start all over, but honestly, I found it enjoyable trying to figure out the best setup with the gear given to you. Once I figured out the best solution for each phase, it was honestly a walk in the park. With Metrak defeated, he will once again waffle on about some stuff and will eventually leap after Templar, the captain shooting him, Metrak falling into the void. With Stratton's airstrike raining down on them, Templar quickly makes his way back to Evelyn and they get out. He and Luger will talk about Rico, Luger knowing about his whereabouts. And that's all I can play. So Liberation had a website-only DLC you could download once you beat the game. And I couldn't get it to work. I tried every which way, and at this point, it's just lost media. Well, for me at least. Thankfully, I was able to find a run of it on YouTube, and god, it looks like so much fun. I wish I could have played it. Though, I will cover it very briefly. So Chapter 5 is essentially Templar going to find Rico, some shenanigans happen, Rico is somehow tricked by Stratton into thinking he's trying to double cross Metrak, only for he and Templar to find out he was actually working for him. So yeah, like Adam, Stratton is also an ISA traitor, and the reason the Helghast managed to escape with the nuclear weapon. But yes, I actually really liked Liberation. After I got over my initial frustrations with it, mainly the controls, it ended up being fairly entertaining, and I liked Kobar and Metrak. I really do love all these goofy little Helgen guys. But now I suppose it's time to finally move on to the next mainline entry, and the fan favorite. Once again, like our mainline counterpart, we open with one of Visari's riveting speeches about Helghast's superiority and whatnot. On the surface of Vecta, the ISA prepare for a long-awaited counterattack against Helgen, dubbed Operation Archangel. 3 years have passed, Templar has been promoted to Colonel, taking command of the ISA cruiser New Sun. Rico is still flying high, and we're introduced to Thomas Sev Sevchenko. Sev, much like Templar, is our straightforward protagonist. Being born to a fairly well-off and respectable family, Sev wanted to do what he could and enlisted into the ISA despite the protest of his parents. After the attack of the Third Army and the suffering it caused many of those close to him, he became even more committed to the fight against the Helgen. He eventually caught the eye of Templar and soon became a part of the Alpha Squad along with Rico. Sev is voiced by Dmitry Gortius in Killzone 2. I won't do another character bit for Rico because we did one during Killzone and what he's been up to was discussed at length in Liberation. But yes, our boy is back and he's a part of the newly formed Alpha Squad. Sev wakes up and readies himself as Dante Garza calls him. Sev gets out to the catwalk, the two able to get a view of the Helgen surface. Before they can talk more, Alpha Squad is called for deployment. Garza, much like Sev, was born into a fairly wealthy family, though he tried everything he could do to rip himself from it. As a last resort, he was thrown into the military, this actually being a benefit to Garza. Here, he was able to meet Sev, the two working well during the Third Army attack. Garza is voiced by Ryan Mikulski in Killzone 2. Heading to the deployment area, they meet up with Rico, who is speaking to Dr. Evelyn Batten. Evelyn was first introduced in Liberation, she being one of the main researchers on the weapons program at Rayhoven. She was eventually captured by General Armin Metrak and despite exhaustive torture managed to get away with help from Luger and Templar, without giving the General the proper codes. Now, along with Templar, she is tasked with retrieving the weapon Red Dust so the Helghast can't use it against the ISA. Evelyn is voiced by Jules De Jong in Killzone 2. Rico tells them who she is and that she's there to track the nuke that was stolen. The group then carry on. Sev and Garza then meet up with the final member of Alpha Squad, Sean Natko. Natko, much like Rico, came from a more humble background and is prone to be more aggressive and vulgar when it comes to several situations. Despite this, he is a loyal and confident officer. Natko is voiced by Noah Lee Margits in Killzone 2. They all pile into a transport, and as they begin to launch, the ISA cruisers rain down fire on the Helghast below. The transport flies towards the enemy, but they come under fire and crash into a beach on the Corinth River, and now make their way to the capital of Helgen itself, Pyrrhus. Sev and Garza are tasked with cutting through the arms warehouse in order to help the main ISA unit enter the city. The team is stalled at a dam, Sev and Garza taking out the Helghast, but it isn't enough. A set of enemy tanks ready and waiting on the other side. Sev manages to take out a few, but Templar radios in saying that an even larger unit is coming their way and that the cruisers will be taking them out. After the successful strike, Templar tells them they need to head to Visari Square to assist Captain Narville. They get back onto a transport and regroup. Heading to the next location, an adjacent dropship is taken out by a massive surge of energy, the Helghast below using an arc cannon to take out the oncoming ISA. They can see down below the convoy with Narville, it under extreme heat from the enemy. The transport lands as Rico orders everyone to get to Narville. They break through a few units and are able to get to the Colonel, Narville telling them about the arc cannon. He orders Garza and Sev to help them take them out. Captain Jason Narville, during the time of the invasion of the Third Army, was within the command of the UCA on Earth. By the time he got back to Vecta, much of the fight had already been done. Feeling a sense of shame and guilt for this, he was determined to prove his worth during the invasion of Helgen. He was able to do so by taking charge of the Avenger convoy, the main unit during the attack on Pyrrhus. Narville is voiced by Mikey O'Connor in Killzone 2. I just realized after the fact they didn't even try to match Narville's voice when getting a new voice actor for him in Killzone 3. He goes from like a generic military man to a gruff action hero. I'm so used to his Killzone 3 voice that I just blanked on who Narville was in Killzone 2.
Glad to see you're back in action. Now we just need to rendezvous with our platoons in the city, and we're clear to take the palace.
Oh, this is just perfect. Just goddamn perfect. Troops, listen up. We are mobile in 5, so pack up your shit. Delta, you know the drill. Hooper, Wheels, ASAP. Where the hell are Velasquez and Sevchenko?
Sorry, this was just really funny to me. Let's move on. Sev and Garza are able to get around the maze-like streets, taking out a large unit or two and get to the top of a building housing the arc cannon. Taking it down, they feel a sense of victory, but it's cut short by the appearance of a flying unit known as an ATAC. The two run trying to cut through the buildings to avoid it and are finally able to make their escape. They end up taking a moment, Garza looking over the cannon shrapnel, wondering if they can use it to figure out how the weapon works, before carrying on. Rico orders Garza to go back to Narville while Sev makes his way to the other half of Alpha Squad. The three now back at it, they make headway towards Vasari Square in an onslaught of Hellgast. Oh, and they end up picking Garza back up as well. The team finally clear out the square, and Narville tells them they got the piece of the arc cannon to Evelyn. He then commands them to move forward to the Solomon district and across the main bridge that goes over the Corinth River. As they try to cross, Norville notices from a distance Colonel Radek. He realizes they're going to attack the bridge and orders everyone to fall back. Before Sev is able, the explosion goes off and he's forced to leap off the side, getting separated from the others. Crawling into the sewer, Sev then enters the bottom of a warehouse where Rico tells him Garza is on his way to get him. Getting to the top, the two meet up and now head back towards the main ISA convoy. Rico radios that they are once again pinned down and that Garza and Sev need to deal with it. While the two are going about destroying the mortars that are keeping Narville and Rico pinned, the radios intercept a transmission from Hellgast Colonel Radek. The colonel telling his men to arm a defense system and is told to hold their grounds until ordered otherwise. Finally getting the last of the enemy cleared out, the two begin to make their way back to the convoy, Evelyn getting in contact with them. She tells them the arc cannon was made out of a special alloy, Garza using this time to mention what Radek said. Evelyn is unsure, asking them to try to find out more. Getting back to the convoy, Garza and Sed decide to go in and blow up the last line of defense the Hellgast had against the bridge. They finally reunite with Natko and Rico and they make their assault across the Solomon Bridge. Once again, Sev and Garza are sent to do much of the grunt work. Take out several Hellgast units, get rid of the obstacles, then clear out the remaining forces on the other side. The convoy is finally able to get through and they make their way to an academy, but before being able to, they stop near a massive crater, a large amount of plasma-like energy radiating from it. Making it to the steps of Radek's academy, they head inside and begin their mission of finding the colonel and eliminating him. They are of course met with a unit of heavily armored Hellgast having to fight through them in order to reach the main office. Finally breaking in, they realize Radek is not there and are forced to come up with a different plan. Before they can, an ATAC attacks. They all end up on the roof having to fight it. The ATAC is eventually taken down and Alpha Squad meets back up with Narville. They begin to carry on, but before they can regroup and move out, a large array-like weapon rises up out of the ground and begins to rain down the same energy from the arc cannon in the crater. The units being decimated within moments. Atop a cliff overlooking Purus, Radek looks on at the carnage that is the capital. Vasari asks him about the situation, Radek remarking that it is a favorable outcome, though the colonel seems disgruntled. Vasari notes his need for bloodshed, then remarks he prefers having him alive. Back down in the city, Rico and Seb contact Templar to try to get an idea of what happened. Evelyn says the weapon had the same type of energy signatures as the arc cannon. She was also able to pick up the same kind of reading from an old refinery within the Helgen Waste, believing this to be where the primary source of power is coming from. Okay, I need to be completely honest, this section is literally the part I had the worst time recounting. For some reason, my brain just could not parse what was going on, so I'm going to explain it the best I can, and if I miss something, oh well. Alpha Squad regroup and make their way into the Waste, a desolate desert of rust and derelict machines. Evelyn directs them to an old mining village where a recon team was sent previously to scope things out. Everyone assumes it's abandoned, but the massive energy signature they picked up from the new sun says otherwise. Heading further in, Evelyn finally reveals that the mysterious energy is something called petricite. Petricite is a primary source of power for the whole of Helgen. It is a refined ore that when superheated turns into a highly volatile energy that can be used for near limitless applications, be it weaponry, transportation, infrastructure, or anything the Helgen can imagine. Getting into the control area, Evelyn notices that it looks like the recon team was trying to set up communications but were cut short. Rico and Sev go out into the waste to see if they can help with repairs. Getting down into the main area, they come across the transport, several ISA soldiers dead. Rico urges them to move quickly to the antenna to reactivate it, but it turns out that it doesn't have power. Finding their way around, they come across a building where they can reactivate it, but Rico warns Sev due to there being blood on the ground. They wait for a moment, then head inside. The coast is clear of any Hellgas, but they find the remains of an unfortunate ISA soldier. Sev activates the power and they head back to the antenna relay. Before they're able to leave, they get attacked by more Hellgas than I care to remember and get over to the antenna, the door now open. Getting down to the area below, they come across canisters of petricite as well as bugs. Big, awful bugs with horrible hitboxes. These are apparently petricite spiders. I guess they eat petricite? I don't know. Let's move on. Getting to a more closed-off area that looks like old housing, Rico and Seb come under attack by a group of snipers. Managing to take them out, they move into another control area for the antenna. Finally turning it back on, Evelyn is able to open communications for the new Sun and Templar. She notices several petricite signatures, then the radio goes to static. Sev and Rico take this as a cue to rush back. Getting back to the main area, they once again get a communication from Evelyn and a scuffle ensues. Rico and Sev see the group of Hellgas taking the three, quickly following after. Getting to a train depot, they see one right off, Rico telling Sev that they need to get on another one so as to follow the rest of the group. They are able to commandeer another train from the Helgen on board and ride it to the Tharsis refinery. Rico and Sev split up, so going through the area, taking out some Hellgas ahead of, the usual affair. Finally getting over to Rico, they realize the refinery is the main connection of the petricite pipeline into the city. This means taking them out would essentially destroy all the primary arc cannons within Purus. The two heading off deeper into the facility, they come across the counterpart of their group and Colonel Mail Radic. He goes about killing an ISA soldier, then demands Evelyn give them the codes for a nuclear device. Rico urges to Sev he can take out Radic, Sev wanting to use another approach. Radic antagonizes Evelyn, then proceeds to kill Garza, Rico barging in. He kills one of the soldiers, but Garza is shot anyway, Radic and the rest of the men escaping up the lift. Sev, Rico, and Natko climb up the facility so they can lower the lift to help Garza get to the top. Evelyn tells them to go ahead, Sev and his group getting outside to a landing site. Eventually, Evelyn will get outside and contact the ISA to come and get him. The transport shows up, Garza worse for wear as Seb calls out for a medic. Back on the new Sun, Garza has unfortunately passed, Sev and the others standing over his casket. Rico tries to talk to Sev, Sev biting back. Before much else can be said, the new Sun is attacked. Sev and company manage to get to the bridge where they can regroup with Templar and Evelyn. The two are preparing the arsenal of the new Sun to take out the main petricite pipeline, Templar asking Sev to keep the Hellgas off them. There's some more dealing with Hellgas and then they get to the main cannons. This is a turret section, I don't need to say much else. Getting out of the turret, Natko meets up with Sev and they head to a lift, Templar going over to the con and instructing everyone to leave the new Sun. They get out into the hangar, Natko and Rico aboard the transport. At the bridge, Templar and Evelyn are interrupted by Colonel Radic. He laments the situation and then asks them for the nuclear codes. Templar tells him he no longer has access, Radic merely calling him out and then shooting Evelyn. The Colonel launches into Radic and being overtaken quickly and shot. Radic then orders his men to retrieve the information he needs. Somehow, Sev saw all this and tells the others, Rico obviously upset. He tries to go to Templar's aid, but Natko stops him. Sev jumps on the troop transport and then they all fly off. Back on the bridge of the new Sun, with the last of his strength, Templar directs the new Sun to crash into the refinery, everything exploding over the Helgen wastes. Getting across a small bit of ground, they happen upon another ISA in a large battlesuit, which they call an EXO or an LS-209 exoskeleton. It's kind of goofy that they call these exoskeletons, but okay. Trundling down the waste, they come across another encampment of ISA, one soldier going at Rico, and how the officers as well as Templar were willing to put them in danger, Rico launching into him. Natko pulls Rico off the officer and they continue forward. This section with the EXO is basically like another turret section. You just had a little more agency, though there really just isn't much to talk about. Finally getting across the waste, they come across Narville. He tells the truth that he and his men are about to make an assault on Visari's palace when a nuclear explosion goes off in the distance. The cloud rises up from the Helgen capital of Pyrrhus, the palace now surrounded by nothing but clouds of dust and turmoil. The Alpha Squad watch as the large army of Helghast move in on the palace and their location. Rico and Nako noting that they're screwed whatever they do, Sev sharing the same thought. Now knowing that they had nothing to lose, they make their final push. Crossing over into the first defenses of the palace, the team has to take out these, tower things. I honestly don't know what they're for. The wiki calls them guidance system towers, whatever that is. I just hated this section, so I blocked most of it from my memory. I think we're actually technically taking out, arc cannons, but I'm not really entirely sure. Again, blocked it from my memory. After that, they're able to make the push into the palace via the inner courtyard. This section of this game is beautiful. The atmosphere, the architect, the design, but once again, because it's so painfully frustrating, I blanked most of it from my mind. I get it, this is supposed to be the big push. All the Helghast are here doing their military thing, but I can still complain about the tedium. And trust me, I will continue to complain about the tedium. Finally making it into the palace, Rico and Sev are confronted by Radek. Okay, I understand. I get why people like Radek, I really do. He is a potentially interesting character. He's got a cool design, and he's also voiced by Sean Pertwee, the same guy who voiced Haka. And I guess now I can finally talk about Radek for a hot minute. I will be honest, there is a lot of fluff written for this character because he seems to be the Killzone darling. Radek is the calculated and ruthless right hand of Scholar Visari. He is considered to be the strongest of the Helghast military, even going so far as to create the strict training regiment the soldiers must follow. We're not given an in-lore reason as to why he chose to stay on Helgen and not join Metrak, Kobar, and Lente on Vecta, but one can assume this is due to him being the personal bodyguard of the Autarch. Now it's gonna be time for me to complain about the Radek fight, cause yeah, I need to complain about the Radek fight. So Killzone doesn't do boss battles. Okay, well, it does, but not normal ones. At this point, if you've played every game in order, you've had fights against Lente, Adams, Kobar, Metrak, and an ATAC. I would consider these all boss fights. So yeah, the only two that feel like conventional ones are Kobar and Metrak, and that's because the arcade nature of Liberation requires you to memorize patterns. Whereas in Killzone, Lente and Adams are you taking down enemies, then eventually the primary character. So Radek is their attempt at doing both? He has phases and some memorization, but ultimately it's just you having to deal with a mass of enemies. You fight a bunch of guys on the first level, then the stairs open up to the top one, and you fight a bunch of guys on the top level, mainly standard Helgen troops and rocket troopers as well as Radek. The third phase is Radek himself, who has a teleportation system that allows you to move around the rune to attempt to get a drop on him. I mean, pretty straightforward, right? Did you know that there's a trophy for beating this section in under 20 minutes? Yes, you heard me right. There is a trophy for beating this section in under 20 minutes. Once again, KT plays games on easy, and I did die a lot, but it took me 30 actual minutes to beat him. And the proper Radek fight was so easy to figure out, I scummed it first time. All I had to do was stand in the furthest back right corner, wait for him to come up to me, and shoot him. He'll either take cover just ahead, or he'll come at you from the left from the entranceway. Once you take down Radek, instead of surrendering, he will turn his pistol on himself and end it. Rico spits on the expired kernel, and they finally push into Visari's office. Visari stands opposite of them on a high platform, looking out the window at the destruction all around him. He cares not for the entrance of his enemy. Sev addresses him only to be cut off by the Autarch. Visari asks who he is, Sev giving his name and rank. Visari turns, wondering why someone of such low rank would be the one to capture him, hinting at the cowardice of Sev's superiors. Sev tells him he's lost, Visari wondering if that is actually the case. He notes all the dead ISA and that what has actually been done to the Helgen is tantamount to nothing. He goes on to claim that the only reason for his capture, not his death, is that the ISA wish to not make him a martyr and that it is ironic that his imprisonment will make Sev and the others a hero. Rico tries to intervene, but Sev stops him, saying he will gladly put Visari behind bars so as to pay for what he's done. Visari merely scoffs, going on about his accomplishments of pride to his people, that the ISA will never win against them and that the Helgen would sooner slaughter their own than surrender. He barks that the chaos would ensure his eventual restoration of power. Before Visari can go on, Rico shoots him, sending the Autarch to the ground. As Sev looks over him helplessly, Visari only mutters the words of madness and perishes. Rico sits on the stairs opposite Sev as Narville and Natko enter. The two see the scene and try to ask Sev what happened, the sergeant merely walking away. As he gets outside, he sees a massive Helgen fleet overhead. His only reaction, to take a seat. Hey, KT, you didn't talk about Vasari. Yes, I know I didn't because I was waiting until now. There is literally just no good moment to talk about Vasari in Killzone 1 or in Killzone 2. It was just better to wait for him to exit the series, then prattle on about who he was. And, well, he's technically the reason I started playing the series to begin with, but he sure as heck ain't the reason I stayed. Once again, much like Radic, there's a lot of fluff about Vasari, so I'm going to just go off what I've seen and what I've learned. So yes, Scholar Vasari, played by Brian Cox, is the catalyst of all things Killzone. He is the autarch of Helgen and the leader of the Helghast, having taken control of the planet via militaristic coup 10 years prior. There is no knowledge of the previous administration, but what we do know is that Vasari brought in massive changes, military, economically, and even culturally, he being the reason the Helgen had their own script. Vasari is from a wealthy family of Helgens, being the CEO and chairman of his own arms company aptly named the Vasari Corporation. It is even rumored that he's the direct descendant of one of the original Helgen Corporation founders. I honestly have a lot to say about Vasari, but I really want to keep that for when I wrap up the series itself. Because while talking about him, I also need to talk about a few characters that are prominent in Killzone 3. So for now, I will leave what I have to say about him at that and move on. And I have to be completely honest, I don't understand why Killzone 2 is the favored son of the series. After playing every single game and watching Mercenary, it just really isn't on my list of favorites. I won't actually make that list until I get into the video talking about the series as a whole, but yeah. A lot of people seem to use Radic as that reason or talk about how it is visually, but I just can't get into it. The game is fine. At this point, I've played it twice, but when I think of which games I'd be willing to pick up just to do a casual run of, it's the bottom of my list in the mainline games. I know a lot of people will be really upset by this opinion, and I will elaborate further on it, but I don't have any more time to spend on Killzone 2. We need to move on. So I suppose it's finally time to now rip off the band-aid. The Problem Child. This game is just fanfiction. Okay, before the lore buffs get upset with me, yes, Mercenary is canon, but the story is just... Mercenary came out as a companion game for Shadowfall, so when I read the synopsis for it, I thought it was just a light story game where you got to pick who you were fighting alongside, be that ISA or Helghast, during the time of Shadowfall. But no, instead, it takes place during the original games. Why is this a companion story for Killzone Liberation and Killzone 2? It makes the already messy storytelling of those games even worse. Oh, and no, I didn't actually play this one, because I wasn't about to invest $300+ on a console for this mess. So yeah, I don't have any footage of the game, but instead you will get a goofy retelling with character art. Oh, and I do apologize in advance, but my retelling isn't going to be that in-depth because again, this game is just So allow me to welcome you all to KT's Killzone Puppet Theater. So during the events of Liberation, General Armin Metrak, the 40k looking dude, told one of his guys, Colonel Victor Kratek, to take the city of Diatrim, where he in turn also takes Admiral Alex Gray as his hostage. Gray is the head of bioweapon development for the ISA on Vecta. Getting word of this, the ISA, because I guess they're out of their own dudes, ask a mercenary group, the Phantom Talon Corps, founded by Anders Benoit, to go after Kratek and rescue the Admiral. So Aaron Danner and Daniel Ivanov do so, but are unable to stop Kratek from shooting Gray and making his escape. Gray does live, so yeah, don't worry, she's fine. The ISA once again called upon the mercenaries to go to a crashed Helgen cruiser where they need to get, I don't know, codes so they can get in contact with the Helghast fleet. Though during this, Ivanov manages to trigger some kind of failsafe and ends up dying, Danner managing to escape. And of course, we all waited out for the time gap because we can't have anything original going on in this game now, can we? 2 years have passed and the ISA for some reason, once again, is calling upon Danner and then to go to Helgen of all places to take out an entire island of arc cannons. cannons, which, because of this game, we find out are actually made by Stahl Arms. I haven't even properly talked about Stahl yet, and I ain't gonna do it here. Just go watch my smaller Killzone video, I talk about him a lot, and obviously once I get to Killzone 3, you'll hear about him. But yes, this island of arc cannons is essentially the reason why the ISA cruisers can't get closer to Helgen. So Danner takes out the arc cannons, and then Benoit comes and gets him. Then, because I guess they're on Helgen, Danner is told that they gotta rescue the Vectan ISA ambassador, Seb Harkin, along with his wife Valera and their son Justice. Harkin and Valeria die, but Justice and his bodyguard Boris are still alive. Boris is like the coolest dude here. Oh, and he's dead. Since Danner can't get off planet, he has to go to a village where he's told he also needs to get a scientist named Mandor Savage. He was apparently at the embassy, but managed to get away before Danner arrived. Justice and Danner avoid some cops and end up finding him. Savage is probably the most interesting character in this game, and that's because it inadvertently ties into a lot of the underlining plot of Killzone 2 and 3, that mainly being all the stuff with Stahl. Mandor Savage is the son of Tor Savage, the archetype behind a lot of arc research and development. He later married and had his son Mandor. During the rise of the Helghast regime, Tor, not wanting his work to be used in militaristic ways, refused and was arrested while his son was spared. Savage was then put in charge of working on most primary arc weaponry. I'm guessing most of this is arc cannons, petrocite refinement, and even potentially the understanding of irradiated petrocite. He, of course, is doing all of this to ensure his family's safety. So yes, as we find out in Killzone 3, a game that came out well before Mercenary, we should know full well that Savage would be a very important member and asset to Stahl Arms. Keep that bit in mind while I continue. So Danner now has Justice and Savage. He manages to fight off some Helghast so they can escape and then eventually get picked up by Benoit. Given another task to do, Danner is sent to a petrocite refinery where he's told he has to take it out. It seems like this was a ruse by Benoit and Gray, because upon completing the detonation, Benoit essentially double-crosses Danner, leaving him to die to the Helghast. Though Kraytek has other ideas, contacting Danner, essentially saying if he helps him get Savage and the kid back, he won't kill him. Oh man, I forgot about the whole bioweapon thing. So Danner is taken back to the embassy by Kraytek, because I guess there wasn't anywhere else they could have gone. And how Orlok or Radek aren't even noticing all this stuff on their own soil is beyond me. Danner gets to Savage and it turns out he's behind making the bioweapon and that the trigger is the boy, or something. What? So yeah, the stuff with the kid being the trigger is dumb, but why was this Stahl Arms Arc Technologies researcher working on bioweapons? If Savage is this important to Stahl Arms, why was Kraytek just allowed to take him to work on a bioweapon? It's obvious with how Kraytek acts, he didn't just ask Stahl for Savage. He basically kidnapped him. And if Savage has the capacity to work on basically anything, why wasn't Stahl just doing it himself? I've proven in my smaller Killzone video that Visari has no problems just pawning important research off to Stahl. Does this mean that Kraytek was doing all this behind not only Stahl, but even Visari's back? Cause like, that's the only thing that makes sense at this point. I'm just gonna get back to the game. So yeah, the player can either kill or let Savage live at this point. I don't know why they'd give you this option of choice, cause it doesn't even matter. Kraytek once again orders Danner to go find Gray and Justice. They go to this massive cruiser that's just hanging out in the waves. Danner ends up taking out Gray and reunites with the boy. As the two try to escape, they run across Kraytek and Benoit. It's seeming the two were working together all along. So we get a triple cross, Benoit double crosses Kraytek, then quadruple crosses Danner. Yes, Benoit was the villain the whole time because he likes money and war. He wants to do something with the kid and the virus, but obviously Danner kills him, then Blackjack of all people decides to hide Danner and Justice. The cruiser crashes, also destroying the virus. Who is Blackjack? He's a dude who sells you stuff. Is he actually important to Killzone as a whole? No. Oh, and the nuke goes off at the end of this game, so it literally goes from Liberation to the end of Killzone 2. You see why this game frustrates me so much? After playing Killzone, Liberation, and Killzone 2, you can see them as a nice little trilogy that works well in terms of story flow. Then this thing comes out and gives me more questions than answers. It just ends up messing with the already wobbly canon of Killzone. This was a companion game to Shadowfall. Why didn't it do stuff in that part of the timeline? I hate Mercenary. I just want to melt all the copies of it down and turn them into a brick that I can sit all the actual good Killzone games on. Oh, and speaking of the good ones... it's time to get on to Killzone 3. Where do you think you're going? I was gonna go talk about Killzone 3, you know, my favorite one? Oh, no. You aren't going to relegate me to the part of the video where only 10 people are going to watch. Oh, no, my little darling. I get my own. Go ahead, tell them they're all right there watching. So, yeah, after doing all that, I felt like Killzone 3 needed its, you know, own video. So I will, see you all then. Don't forget the Patreon and the social media. You know you could just give me, like, I don't know, $100? Oh, no. So yeah, please do all the social media stuff, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Hopefully. And thank you so much to these lovely people for their help on the video.